Good evening. We will be spending our time this evening in the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke. That's the third book in the New Testament. Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verses 13 to 21. So then one from the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance between me and him." But Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me a judge over you?" And Jesus said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." Verse 16. Then Jesus spoke a parable to them, saying, "The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns," referring to his old barns, "and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and all my goods." Verse 19. "And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? So is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." This is a beautiful parable about not only about treasure, but also about how do we handle our treasures, our belongings. Like, what is our heart with regards to that? What is our spiritual atmosphere with regards to the things that God has given us? How do we respond to the blessing that God has given us? Do we keep them all to ourselves? Do we give them? Do we share them to others? And so this is the parable that kind of addressed part of that problem. And this begins with an occasion where a brother, probably Jesus was teaching at this time, and this brother came to Jesus and said, "Rabbi, teacher, can you help me settle this problem with my brother?" So this brother is probably a younger brother, because usually in their time, when you're a younger brother, you don't have a lot of say as to how much you will get, as to what kind of lot or what kind of treasures you will get from the family. Most of the time, those kinds of belongings, the property, the name, the treasure, the gold, goes to the firstborn. And this is usually true with not only in the Middle East during their time, but also in some European countries as well as Asian nations, that the oldest, like for example, me, I am the oldest of 9, so most of the responsibility and most of the inheritance from my parents goes to me, like the rubber farm, the rice farm, couple of old cars probably, those kinds of stuff. So that goes to me because I have the responsibility and the oldest to share that to my siblings. So this person probably right here in verse 13 is one of the younger brothers that says, "Teacher, Rabbi, my oldest brother has all the belongings that my dad has given to him. Can you help me and the rest of my siblings have some share of that?" And so Jesus said, "Who am I to make this kinds of judgment between you and your brother?" Now, the case here is that there's a lot of history in this, and part of the history is like what I said, the birthright, that they inherit the family estate. The oldest brother get the double share. They have the privilege, but also the responsibility of sharing that. The other part of the history is that it has been in their tradition to always carry the name. If I'm the oldest, carry the name, carry the wealth, carry the treasure, and also multiply the treasures. So it's probably in this case that this older brother that we don't know of is hoarding all these things and not sharing those privileges, this responsibility to the younger siblings. And so Jesus has given a parable so that we can understand. So the parable goes like this. He said, the ground is plentiful and it yielded a lot, probably 100 times. And so when this person realized that his efforts has been producing abundantly, he finally came up with this thought, which is a good thought, and we all should have kind of this thought. Like, if your income is growing, your business is growing, your salary is jumping, everything is going good, is doing good, you should probably think like, what am I going to do with these things that I have acquired right now? And so he thought, well, this is the best thing that I will do. I will destroy all these old barns that I have because I have too much. but not enough for this plenty that I have right now. So he destroyed his old barn and built a new one, much larger, bigger, stronger, sturdier. And then, this is what he said to himself. Verse 18, he said, I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. So he told himself, so you have acquired so many things. It's now your time to just sit back and relax and enjoy your labor. Now there's two problems here. The first problem is in verse 18. It says, I will store all my crops and my goods. I'm reading from the New King James Version, but in NIV it says, I will store all my surplus. In the Old Testament, the Jewish people, the Israelites, was told to never reap everything, to always leave leftover for the foreigners, for the poor, for the pilgrims. And that text we will read for a minute. It's in Deuteronomy 24, verse 19. And said, when you're harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, do not go back to get it. Leave it for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. So this is the commandment of God, that whenever you reap something, you always leave something for the poor and the fatherless and the widows and the foreigners, so that they will have something to provide for themselves as well. So this problem right here, he is hoarding everything. He's not leaving anything for the poor, for the fatherless and the foreigners. He's hoarding it for himself. So that's one problem. The second problem is that instead of recognizing that this is all from God, he said to himself, soul, instead of saying, God, this is all from you. He said, soul, instead of saying, God, this is all from you. He said, soul, I deserve this. I have gained this. I have worked hard for this. So take ease. Enjoy the profit. You deserve this. So what's the problem with these two things that we discussed? First one is not leaving anything for the poor and the fatherless and the widows and the orphans. And the second one is not giving credit to God. What's the problem with that? What's the big deal with that? One is selfishness. This person is really selfish, and you can see it from the first text where the younger brother is urging Jesus Christ to intervene and ask the older brother to share the blessing to the younger brothers and the younger siblings. And the next is that this person is all about himself, his ability to provide for himself. And this is a problem that sometimes we have, because, you are the one that went to school, you are the one that worked hard to elevate yourself into a certain position, to get a certain kind of number for your income. You are the one that invested so much on reading books. If you are one of those gurus about a financial investment or something like that, you are the one that did all the stuff just so you can get to this position. And so the mindset is that I deserve this because I worked so hard for this. But the parable teaches us that that is not the case, because whatever you do, you always have to give credit to God, because first and foremost, He's the one that gives you life. He's the one that gives you the health. He's the one that gives you the ability to think, and He's the one that gives you the ability to walk and the ability to use your hands. Work is a gift of God. And we can see this in Genesis chapter 3, that from the very beginning, God has given mankind the ability to till the garden. Even before Adam and Eve fell, did the eating the apple, as they say, but even though it was not an apple. Even before they did that, it was already given to them to till the ground. They were already given the privilege to work, and work is something that we not only use to provide something for ourselves, but we enjoy working. One of the examples of this is when you are working something like a carpentry, or, for example, John Lewis is working on 3D printing, like the heart that I asked of him. You enjoy it. You enjoy it. You find something in it that blesses your soul, that you create something, and out of your creation comes this beautiful project. A stool, a bench, a 3D printed heart, which I will use later in my sermon sometime this February. It just benefits something for you, because work is where you can find the creativity of God. Whenever you work, you put your mind into it, and you can sense that God has touched that brain of yours, and that creativity of God is reflected to your masterpiece as well. And so we're going to jump to part of the conclusion here. He is rich, but full because he was, one, selfish. He responded wrongly to his wealth. The third, he did not recognize God as the ultimate provider of his wealth. The fourth one is he relied on his wealth as his form of security. And we're going to go back to that one. He thought that he can have many years of good life as long as he has wealth. And then the fifth one is that he has no regard for others. And let's go back to this one, the fourth one. He relied on his wealth for his security. Today, we have many forms of making sure that we are secure. We buy guns to keep ourselves secure. We probably have a couple of hand carries, one in our car, one on ourselves. There's probably AKs or ARs somewhere or machine guns somewhere to protect ourselves. And we also install cameras on any corners of our houses, and we also put like the sensors, motion sensors. We have many tools that we can use to protect ourselves, and we can advance even with, the safety of ourselves. And this is all for our safety. The problem is when we put too much of our safety based on those things. It's not that it's wrong, but the problem is when all of our trust is on those things, we are actually idolizing those things, and we're saying, this can save me. Yes, they can save you, but temporary salvation, right? And that is one problem that God had addressed to Israel in the Old Testament. We can see this in the Minor Prophets, and we will not go to the Minor Prophets tonight because of time. That they have trust so much, they have put so much of their trust on their idols, on their soldiers, on their alliances with other nations like Syria, like in the book of Hosea, on their gold, on their wealth. Hezekiah showed his gold to other kings. He said, these are my gold. He took the kings from the other nations and showed it to the kings of the other nations, and he took them to the temple, and it gave the other nations the idea of what's in there. So when that kind of idea or mindset gets into our head, we are actually replacing God. We're saying, this is the source of my security. And that's a problem. This is the problem with this person right here. He's saying, so take ease, drink, be merry, be happy. So his source of security is his wealth. God said in verse 20, a strong word, by the way. Jesus used a strong word here. He said, fool. It's unbelievable, right? That Jesus would use such a word, strong language. Fool, he said. I think this is raka, probably. I did not check this in Greek. This is probably raka in Greek. It said, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided? Fool. Why is it foolish? You work hard to save up for your kids, to save up for yourself, for your retirement. You work hard to secure your house. You work hard to put money in your bank account. You work hard for these things. I work hard for that as well. But why is this foolish? It is foolish because of these 5 things that we mentioned. And it is foolish because of this one thing. He was only rich in this world, but not rich towards God. Rich in this world, but not rich towards God. Matthew chapter 16, we have talked about this in the past. It's a reminder to us about this parable. It said, what shall you gain if you gain the whole world, but then loses your own soul? What shall it profit a man if he owns the whole world, yet loses his own soul? And we see here of where we put our heart, our value, of where our true treasure is. If our true treasure is on these things that we experience every day, then we're not really putting value on the true value that we should, invest on. And if you become like Bill Gates, good for you. If you become like Steve Jobs, good for you. If you become like Jeff Bezos, the owner of Amazon, or if you become like Gepher, but forget. For whoever you may become, even if you own the whole world, even if you have millions and trillions and I don't know what's next to trillions, if your soul is not right with God, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Because that's not where the true treasure is. And so, it's very true here in chapter 6 of Matthew when Jesus said, store up treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. because that's where the true treasure is. Now, please do not misunderstand me if you hear me saying that we should not work, that we should not save up, that we should not enjoy the things that we are accumulating, that we should not, put money in a bank account. That's not this sermon is about. This sermon is making our heart right with God, with what He has given us. Because we've been talking about blessing, and we have seen in Deuteronomy chapter 7, and also even in Deuteronomy chapter 8, where God is a cheerful giver. He loves to bless His people. Let's go very quickly to Deuteronomy chapter 8. So you can see just how much of a giver is God. Because I know that we discussed Deuteronomy chapter 7 a couple of Sundays ago. But Deuteronomy chapter 8, I'm just going to pick up a couple of verses here. It said, "When you have eaten and are full and have beautiful houses and dwell in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, and so on and so forth, then you will say in your heart, my power and my of my hand have gained me of this wealth." So we can see in the first part of that text where God is blessing materially, physically, and He's a God that blesses physically, materially, but also spiritually, and He wants us to experience it. But the problem is similar here in verse 17. This verse of Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 17 is similar to the parable in Luke chapter 12. The problem is this one. "Then you will say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth." I did all of this. I earned this. That's the problem. And so that's why in the first part of this text in Deuteronomy chapter 8, He said, beware. Beware. Beware that you do not forget that it was the Lord your God who provided you these things, who took you out of Egypt, who provided water for you in the desert, who brought you all of these things. Beware that you do not forget about that. And so the same warning is given to us tonight. Beware that you don't put too much trust on the things that you are experiencing right now. Is God happy to make you rich? He loves to do that. Physically, materially, and spiritually. We have seen it in Deuteronomy chapter 7 and 8, and we also talk about John chapter 10, verse 10, also John chapter 14, where God blesses us spiritually and even heaven. But He never intended for us to put our trust on the things that is meant to bless us so we can bless others. So when God does something for you, that may be financial wealth, that might be physical wealth, that might be wisdom. Never forget to give thanks to God. Always recognize God, or else you'll become rich but full. Rich but full. I want to close this topic tonight with a thought, an imagination. Imagine yourself that you work so hard, and you all are hard workers. And after 10 years of working 24/7, you have saved $1 billion in your bank account. So you have $1 billion in your bank account. Whew, big number, right? And you have acquired a couple of sports cars. And you have acquired a couple of houses. One in Florida, one in California, one in Colorado, one in Alaska probably. Just imagine, just indulge in the moment. And then you also have acquired not only the real estate, but you also have acquired a couple of airplanes, jets, really powerful jets. And so you have all the things that you can enjoy. You have money, you have houses, real estate, you have jets, all the things that you could think of. That's what we want. That's what we long. That's what most of us would like to imagine and to experience. But also imagine that after 10 years of accumulating this, a year after that, the 11th year, you suddenly felt all kinds of problems in your health. You have arthritis, you have a problem with your lung, with your heart, problem with your brain, you have cancer. All of these things suddenly come together. All just happens together. So that means you only have 1 year of enjoying it. How much is it really? How much is your treasure really? It's not much. Yes, you can go to a certain doctor. You can call this doctor, "Doctor, fix my lungs." The doctor will fix your lungs. "Doctor, fix my heart." The doctor can fix your heart. "Doctor, fix my knees," because I have arthritis. The doctor can fix your knees. And let's just say you can live for another 5 more years. But do you really enjoy the treasure that you have? The $1 billion, the houses, the jets, the sports car. Can you really enjoy it? After 5 years, you die. Gepher died after 5 years. And he faces God. God's going to ask him, how did you spend your blessings? How did you spend your blessings? So that's the question that this parable and also Deuteronomy chapter 8 leaves us with. How did you spend your blessings? Because it's not a question whether God blesses or not. He blesses. But the question for us tonight is, how did you spend your blessing? So that's the question that we're going to leave. And I hope that it will continue to trouble your head for the rest of the week. And as we think about that, I would like to also offer an invitation for those that would like to become part of God's family. Because God is really a good God and He loves to bless. It's what He does. That's His masterpiece. So if there's anybody here that's not yet part of God's family but has been thinking about it and would like to become a part of God's family, it will be your wisest decision in your life. So don't be shy. Come forward. The door is open. Everybody's a sinner. God will continue to heal you, restore you, but also bless you so that you can be a blessing to others.